Thank you for joining the Kansas City Public Library and Jason Anderson from Grad Metrics to talk tonight about an introduction to college and career planning. Jason, thanks so much for being with us tonight. I'm going to turn it over to you and let you share information that you have about college and career planning. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, let me go ahead and get my slide deck shared with you all. It's good to be here tonight. I do quite a few of these presentations on all different topics across libraries, across school districts, many different places. I've also worked with hundreds of different families planning and preparing for college. And so I just love anytime I get an opportunity to go out in the community, present this information, tell you about some of the things that will help you and your children plan and prepare for college. And that's actually exactly what this presentation is. This presentation is designed to guide a family through high school in a sequential step-by-step process to really talk about college planning. What are the main things that you need to hit? All the way from saving for college, even before high school, through each year in high school, and then even beyond a little bit, talking about success in college. So this is a good 30,000 foot view. I get a lot of families that come to me and they say, hey, Jason, we need to know what to do. We don't know what to be doing at this moment in time. And that's what this presentation is designed to do, is to guide families through that sequential process. Think of it as kind of like your checklist, right? So that's what many families look for in this presentation. I hope it'll deliver for you. So just a roadmap. What are the main things that we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about financial aid, and we're going to talk about it in kind of a 30,000 foot view, because many families want more in-depth guidance, which, by the way, this is a 3-part series with Kansas City Public Library. And so we'll talk general college planning in this presentation. We'll talk about the FAFSA coming up. I believe that one's next week. These are all on Tuesdays. So next week, I think we do FAFSA. The week after that, we'll talk about how do you come up with your dream career by using personality assessments. And so all of these tie together. You'll see where they fall in the timeline as we go through this. But again, this is your general roadmap. So we'll talk about picking a college. We'll talk about defining a dream career. We'll talk about test preparation options, so specifically the ACT, SAT. We'll talk about kind of the main tricks of college consultants. What I love about doing these presentations is I kind of like to pick apart the industry a little bit and say, you know, there's a lot of people out there that are selling this or that, and all they want is profit or a commission on some weird product that they're selling. So a lot of people trying to give advice in this college space. And I really love the fact that I don't really come from that angle. I love to tell you what are the main tips and tricks for the people out there that are college consultants. What are they doing? Where are they adding value? And how can you do that yourself for your family? And so I love doing that too. Which, by the way, before we get started, there are 2 hats that I wear in life. I mean, I wear many more, right? I'm a dad. I have all these different things that I do in life. But the 2 main hats that I wear, at least in terms of work, are I'm a professor at KU. So I'm a lecturer in the School of Business, and I teach management courses. I teach at the KU Edwards campus here in the Overland Park area. So that's one hat that I wear. The other hat that I wear is Grad Metrics, which is a small college planning firm that I started this year to help families plan and prepare for college. So I do like to let you all know, in this scenario, I'm wearing my Grad Metrics hat. I'm not wearing my KU hat. And so I just like to tell you all that KU hasn't endorsed this, and they certainly appreciate that I try to keep those 2 different lives separate for them. So wanted to give you that disclaimer. Now, that being said, I do like to talk about KU, right? So one thing that I like to ask families and quiz them before we get going here is, I have so many families that come to me and they say, Jason, we had no idea how much college cost. Because families wake up and maybe they went to school 30, 40, 50 years ago, and they woke up today to present time, and it's like they just emerged from the bomb shelter to figure out what college actually costs. So if you were to guess, as we go through this presentation, if you were to guess what the full cost to go to KU is, and this is just one example in many, If you were to say, okay, tuition and fees, room and board, transportation expenses, personal expenses, so the whole kit and caboodle, what do you think it costs per year to go to KU? Think of that number in your mind. It might surprise you. 1 year at KU, current dollars, if you were to go to Lawrence and live in the residence halls, do that whole thing, 4 year residential experience, you're basically looking at about 26,000. Which, by the way, I've done these presentations just a couple years ago, and this is already inflated, right? If we look at a 5 year increase, so 5 year inflation, which college cost tends to inflate at at a greater clip than the economy overall, inflation overall. If we look at that at 4 years, $115,640. It's incredible. Like I said, I just did this presentation a couple years ago and it was at 100. And now we're at 115, and I'll do it 2 years from now. It'll be at 125. Pretty incredible. These numbers are on KU's website. You can look at any school's website and find this information. By the way, when you get a financial aid letter before your kid goes to school, you'll get us all this information outlined in a very summarized format where it'll show you all the aid and all the scholarships you've been given by the school and by the government. It'll show you this full cost of attendance, and you'll at that point know what you'll actually have to pay to the school. But I like to tell families, college is a lot like a used car lot. You really never know what it actually costs. For instance, there are schools here in the metro that charge 40, 50,000 a year to go to school there. But generally speaking, most families don't pay that amount of money to go there. So it can be rather perplexing for many families. And I do like to tell families too, this isn't your fault. You woke up one day and this is what cost looks like. This isn't something you've done wrong. A lot of families come to me and they're like, man, we didn't prepare for this. And I'm like, you didn't know that this was going to happen. Many families aren't prepared for this because you can see here's the inflation rate. Versus average cost a tuition. And this has increased substantially over time. It's kind of a crazy increase versus what everything else is, like bread and eggs and other services. In many respects, this is kind of not unprecedented, but it's just a very sharp rise, right? And many families, again, ask me, hey, why is this the case? And I can outline a few things. This isn't a comprehensive list, but if you've ever driven by a major college campus, you'll realize it's under constant construction. There's always a new building being built, always new things being maintained, new residence halls, new academic buildings. Some of that's funded by taxpayer dollars. Some of that's funded by philanthropic support, for instance, people giving gifts, but it's also funded by tuition revenue. Administrator costs, so the administrator ranks have swelled over time. There's more discounting, especially at private institutions. This means that many schools will have a sticker price, like I said earlier, maybe a William Jewell or a Rockhurst, my alma mater, very high sticker price, but then they end up giving many scholarships to make it more in line with a state school price because they have to compete with UMKC across the street, for instance. And so that's called discounting. Private schools on average do it 50%. So take that Rockhurst sticker price, and on average, private schools are making it half. So it's more a reasonable number there. So that's discounting. We'll get to that here in a bit. And then student loan debt. And I really think student loan debt is the next bubble in the economy. I may be wrong on that. I'm certainly not an economist, but it is something that is pretty unsustainable. I put this slide again to make you feel better about yourself. I don't want families thinking, hey, I didn't plan, I didn't prepare, how am I going to make this work? Because you didn't prepare for colleges to look like this, right? This is pretty luxury living. This isn't what my house looks like. This probably isn't what your house looks like, or your apartment complex, or wherever you find yourself living. But these are the type of amenities that you'll see on a college campus, and this costs money. Speaking of which, the number one and the number two college cost drivers today are tuition itself and living on campus. And so as we'll talk about how to make college affordable, actually one of the ways you can make it affordable is by opting out to live on campus in these type of accommodations. So let's start on our timeline, right? First step on the timeline is saving for college. So as we look at the 4 steps of saving for college, there's really what I tell families to think about. So if you have a small child, and you're starting to think about these things. And I've had pregnant mothers call me and say, "Hey, I want to start saving for college." Some people are way ahead of the game. And I tell them this is what you need to do to figure out what that number is. Now, of course, you can also go to a financial advisor. You can also go to maybe a financial professional in your life, and they could do a similar calculation. But if you want to do it on your own, there are ways to do this. The first is to set your goals and savings philosophy. This is an important step that many families honestly don't do. They don't take the time to go through it, but you really need to decide what do we want college to look like for our kids. So I'll give you my personal savings philosophy. My wife and I sat down and we talked about what we wanted for our children. And what we had decided on was that we want to pay for them to go to the local community college, which I can throw a stone and hit Johnson County Community College down the street. And so we know that we want to save up enough to pay for that. And then after that, we'd like for them to go to a 4-year school and finish. And we want to pay about 1/3 of the cost of that for them to live on campus at a school and go 2 years and finish up their degree. And so I have pretty clear goals that I can look at what the cost of those scenarios might be, and I can actually regress it back to what I'll have to save now in order to hit that in, let's say, 15 years or whatever. So you have to set that savings philosophy first. Then you can go to a college calculator. I've linked some here. And by the way, I'll have this in PDF form for you to download if you'd like. And I'll show you where you can do that at the end of the slide deck. You can go to like Vanguard or Saving for College, many different websites out there. And you can project those college costs. What will that cost in 4 years? Then you can actually regress this back to a monthly savings number. And then you can work with a financial advisor or trusted advisor, or you can do the research on your own to figure out if you want to put that in a savings account, or if you want to put that in some type of stocks, or a 529 account is another thing that many families do. Again, not advice from me because I'm not a financial advisor, but you might want to work with somebody to help you learn through those things. And 2 great resources for you. If you're on the Missouri side, the 529 plan is Missouri Most. Kansas, it's Learning Quest. And they have excellent resources to help you kind of create a philosophy and learn what it might cost to go to college. So that's my advice for you if you want to start thinking about how do we save for college, right? Then we go on to freshman year. So let's warp speed up to high school. You can do work in middle school when it comes to college, but generally what I find is most families start to think about college in a very real way when they get to high school. And actually, many families don't start thinking about it until end of junior year, if they're lucky, and senior year if they're probably like most folks. And so I want to give you a longer timeline to really kind of break this work up over 4 years, where you'll have specific steps that you need to be tackling as you hit freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year. So freshman year, what are the things you need to be doing for freshman year? Well, your primary goal for freshman year is to set your academic and extracurricular pathway, right? So you need to have a college plan of study. Many colleges require their students to have a specific course sequence in order to be admitted. And so we tend to find that that is math. That's a combination of, let's say, algebra 1, 2, geometry, trig, and calc. We'll see science like biology, chemistry, physics, earth science. We'll see social studies, like a lot of times, especially state schools will require things like US history and government, world history, geography. Some schools also require foreign languages, a specific sequence or number of courses in foreign languages. And then sometimes we see requirements in the arts as well. But generally what you need to know is your resource here is you can do your own online research, of course, but counselors are paid to do this type of work. But the thing is you might be asking yourself, why do college consultants exist? Why do families go out and pay somebody to help them through this type of stuff? And it's because, believe it or not, in metro areas, the average counselor to student ratio sits in the ballpark for, again, metropolitan areas of about 600 to 1. And that can go down to, let's say, 301. Sometimes you'll get even more lucky than that if you're at a charter school or something along those lines. But generally speaking, these counselors are not only doing college planning, they're also doing behavioral. And so you have two separate jobs crammed into one. You have 600 people. I mean, I've worked in jobs where I had clients that I was working with, and I had 100 clients. And I felt like I was overwhelmed, right? These counselors are working with 300, 400, 500, 600 students. And so sometimes they can't be the resource that we would hope they would be. And it's not their fault. It's just that they have a huge student load that they have to service. And so it is what it is, but your counselor can help you with this. And many schools do have some type of sequence to help you figure out what are the classes I want to take, when do I want to take them, and what electives do I want to take. But if there isn't a sequence to do that, you should either do some research, or you'll have my contact information at the end of the slide deck. You're more than welcome to reach out to me as well. And I can provide you some links and resources in this area. So you'll want to also at this point to start looking towards the future of college scholarships. And so what I encourage families to do is to create a profile on a private scholarship search. And so my favorite is fastweb.com. And actually, I believe, next slide deck, you'll get the whole list. But fastweb.com, or next slide in the slide deck is what I meant to say, you'll get the full list. And so when it comes to FastWeb, you can just put in a profile, and you could actually do it as if you're a junior or a senior. See what curates for you in terms of scholarships, and then start thinking, okay, read through the descriptions. All right, this one requires 300 hours of community service. And you can start in your mind thinking, okay, these are the things that I need to start doing over the next 4 years. And you can start, again, projecting into the future what you want your college profile to be in order to get college scholarships and to be appealing to schools. And we'll talk about getting academic scholarships here in a couple slides. But the other thing I ask families to do is to create an activities resume, or to start creating that and then update it year to year. And what that is it's essentially like a job resume, where you're putting together all the activities, all the academic achievements, all the awards that you've acquired, and really starting to think as you put this down, what type of essentially projection or profile am I starting to build about myself that colleges are going to say, oh, this person's really high achieving in biology, or they're really high achieving in business, whatever that major pathway is. We'll talk about picking a major pathway here in a second. But you need to start thinking about how do we form that kind of continual forward movement in terms of building that student profile that you're going to use when you apply to schools down the line. So private scholarship websites, here are a number of them, but I do also like to put a disclaimer at this point. Let's look at how families are actually paying for college. This is research done, and you'll see that when we look at the majority of students and how they're paying for school, the majority of the money is coming from this grants and scholarships bucket. But I can tell you private scholarships, which are what you're seeing here, things from like scholarships from the Rotary Club and Coca-Cola Company, things like that, are only about 2.5% to 5% of scholarships. The majority of your money for college is going to come from the institution itself, scholarships that they're giving you and grants they're giving you, and then from the government. So through loans, and we'll talk about what that looks like. But keep that in mind. This isn't kind of a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's something that you should try and kind of strategize around, but it's not something that you should spend tons and tons of time thinking that you're going to get all your money from these private scholarship searches. This is what an activities resume might look like, outlining your education and activities, additional responsibilities, work experience, skills that you have, hobbies, academic achievements, extracurricular activities, dual credit courses, AP courses, things like that. You're starting to put it into a resume form. This will make it easy to apply for scholarships and for applications once the time comes senior year. All right, so that's freshman year. That's what I think families should be focusing on at that point in time. Now we move on to the sophomore year, second year in high school. At this point, what you really need to be focusing on is discovering your personality type and discovering careers. And if this really piques your interest, please come to my presentation that's going to happen in 2 weeks on finding your dream career. We really drill down into this topic, but here's the high level for now, and this will get you hopefully in the right direction. So what you need to do at this point is take a personality assessment. I really love 16 personalities based on the Myers-Briggs typology. It will give you a 4-letter code that gives you your personality type. So for instance, I'm an INTP. as my 16 personality types code, my Myers-Briggs code. And so I can then take that and I can get a book, which will be in the next slide, and I can confirm that that's my result. Then the second half of that book is actually giving me information on my specific personality type. And at that point, it starts to tie into careers. And so as you look through those lists of careers in this book that I'm going to show you, then you can go and research them on websites like the Occupational Outlook Handbook published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You can figure out what it takes to become one. You can figure out your average salary, for instance. And this is really, really helpful for families as they start to think about what major do I want? Because there's a lot of misconceptions. For instance, I get a lot of families that come to me and their kid wants to get a degree in psychology and become a psychologist, which is great. But most students, surprisingly, don't know that that will take at least a master's degree, and if not a master's, a doctoral degree if you want to be a clinical psychologist. There's a misconception out there that you can become a counselor with an undergraduate degree, and that's simply not the case. And unless maybe pastoral counseling or some of these other things, but generally to be kind of a licensed social worker or a that does counseling, or a clinical psychologist, someone that you would see maybe take appointments in a lot of places like an academic institution, we're going to have to be PhD. So quite a lot of schooling there. You want to figure that out ahead of time, of course. So Bureau of Labor Statistics Occupational Outlook Handbook. So those are the things that I would do. And once you figure out some of these majors or career pathways that really interest you, then you can start taking electives in those areas. You can go and job shadow people. You can volunteer. You can do a number of things to get real world experience in these areas to see if it's right for you. Because shockingly, 50% of students going into college don't know what they want to major in. 50% coming out actually don't use the major that they got while they were in college, which is definitely not a statistic that you want to be a part of. And so you want to do some of this research before you get to college and start paying 100, even 1,000 a credit hour to experiment in classes. You want to have a better understanding before you go off to college. And that will help you also get through quicker. Most students aren't graduating on a 4-year timeline anymore. It's a 5-year timeline, which is even more expensive than those slides that I showed you several slides back. All right, so now we're also going to get to, it's sophomore year, you have to start thinking, you've started to think about it in freshman year, but you have to also start thinking about how do I continue to work towards getting things like academic scholarships. And so I'd like to ask folks at this time, what do you think are the 3 main things that colleges are looking for to give academic scholarships? And I'm talking about these top scholarships, so like the Presidential Scholarship at Rockhurst or UMKC, those half ride, those full ride scholarships. What do you think of the 3 things that they're looking for? So hopefully you've got a good idea in your mind. Well, here they are. So they're going to look at GPA. They're going to look at ACT or standardized test scores. So generally ACT here in the Midwest, SAT on the coast, and then class rank. And so if I were to give kind of low bars on this in terms of the highest scholarship potential, your GPA is probably going to have to be about a 3.8. Your ACT is probably going to have to be a 28 or above. Your class rank is generally going to have to be like 15 and above if you want those top scholarships. That doesn't mean you won't get other scholarships, but it underlines the importance of academics at this point in the game. You really do want to be working through and making sure that you're getting a good GPA. And those early courses are really, really important because the more grades you get down a certain pathway, the harder it is to change the pathway that you've gone down. ACT, SAT, I'm going to show you free test prep resources, which by the way, Kansas City Public Library, one of my favorite places for freely available test prep resources. So we'll talk about that. You don't have to go and pay somebody to do test prep. And then class rank, of course, really important. Some counties in the metro don't keep class rank, but generally if your school doesn't keep class rank because it's not meaningful for that school, a lot of schools take the top 2 out of 3 here. Yeah, so Bureau of Occupational Outlook Handbook, I do want to pull out a couple things that we just talked about. That how to become one tab is right here. So I've pulled up accountants and auditors here, and then median pay. And this is across the occupation, so you shouldn't necessarily expect this when you get straight out of school. But generally what accountants and auditors are getting paid out there $70,000 a year, which, you might have a kid, again, this is realistic expectation setting, that has thought, oh, well, I'm going to be a CPA and I'll be CFO. Well, yeah, maybe you could make six figures in that role, but generally auditors and accountants aren't making that. And so you need to have a realistic expectation of what you'll make. Those two books for discovery that I told you about, the one that I really want to point you to, and I know Kansas City Public Library has it on their shelves. You can also buy it at Amazon or what have you for a relatively cheap price. You can also buy a previous version. By the way, this has been published many, many versions. So you can always buy a version back and it's going to be cheaper. But Do What You Are is that book that I told you. Take 16 personality assessments. Buy this book, go through the first 7 chapters, verify your personality type, and then read the chapter on your personality type and start discovering careers that match up. We know from research that personality really doesn't change over a lifetime. And this is an excellent, excellent way to find a career that you're going to be satisfied with. By the way, sometimes parents are like, ooh, I need to do that. And I would encourage you to do that as well. For those of us that are career changers later in life, this is a great resource when you're trying to pivot or think of something new, especially if you found yourself maybe unemployed during COVID. This is a great opportunity to say, okay, what's going to be satisfying to me and what should I do? All right, so we're on to junior year, year 3 in high school. This is probably the number one strategy that college consultants out there, or independent education consultants is what they're called a lot of times. This is the bread and butter. If you remember nothing from this presentation, please remember this slide. And it's called the 3 buckets, all right? And any college consultant, any independent college consultant is going to be doing this type of work. And so what this is junior year, you have to start building a college list. You have to start thinking about, where am I going to go to school? The best way to do that is to think of the schools that you're researching and that you're looking into and you're taking campus visits. You're putting them into 3 different buckets. And so much like I'm sure many people that give advice on investments are going to say, hey, diversify your portfolio. Well, what that means is you don't want all your eggs in one basket. The same thing is true for college school list. And so what you need to do in this instance is you need to put about 8, let's just say 5 to 10 colleges across these 3 buckets. And so your first bucket is safety schools. And so these are schools that you can afford, that you'll get into from an admission standpoint. You should put a few colleges here. And so this could easily be maybe a cheaper state school. It could be a community college. It could be a number of schools that are more affordable and give you an option to go that path if you need to. The next is match. And so when your students are researching a college list and they're like, oh man, I really want to go to XYZ school, this would be in match. These maybe fit where your major wants to go, what schools are good at engineering or business or sciences. Then it's also schools that maybe your child has an affinity towards. So maybe they visit Park University and they're like, oh, I love the campus, I love the student life, put it in the match bucket. Right? So those are schools that match up. They'll probably get into, you're maybe not as sure about the finances, but you want to give them a shot. They want to apply. Put it in the match bucket. Especially for those of you that have high performing students, or maybe good at sports or good at playing the tuba, have some type of merit, you should throw a couple schools in the reach. And this is where it's going to be harder to get in. The finances seem a little disproportionate to what you would be able to afford. But again, my experience, I went to Rockhurst for a state school price. You looked even at that time and the yearly cost at Rockhurst was crazy. When I got those scholarships, it put it down more towards a state school price, and that made it within the realm of possibility for me. So you should put some in the reach bucket. Mainly be 1, 2, 3, 4 schools, but you should put some there. Shoot for the stars, see what happens. And again, this gets back to this idea of tuition discounting. So you should especially put some private schools in your reach bucket. Why private schools? Private schools, again, have to compete with state schools. And so what happens is in order to have this aura of prestige in the community, what they'll do is they'll have a really high sticker price. And so you'll get on their website and you're like, oh my gosh, this is $40,000 a year. There's no way I'm going to be able to afford that. But what happens is many of these private schools give general scholarships to their students that makes it at least half that price on average. And so you should always put in an application just to see what happens. You can always say no, but let's see what package they offer you, and you actually might be surprised. And you also, at this point, need to define the criteria. Do you want a certain accreditation or prestige factor? Do you want a specific cost? Do you want students to graduate with an average amount of debt? Or do you have a legacy wish that your child goes to a school that you went to? Do you care about location? Do you care about rural versus urban? There's so many different things. Many college searches out there let you filter and do research based on these criteria. And so I would encourage you to find your favorite. I'm more than happy to recommend some of those. And actually, here are my favorites on this slide: College Scorecard, College Navigator, College Affordability and Transparency Center, Factual, College Board, College Match. There's a million different searches out there. These are some of my favorites that I think have the best data points for you to do searches on. And so again, download my PDF when you get to the end of this slide deck, and you'll be able to click on these links, go to all those websites, and they'll be great resources for you. So after you create a school list, then you have to build the deadlines. And so let's say you get those 8 schools, then you have to start thinking, okay, what are the deadlines for admission? What are the deadlines for financial aid at that school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You put those into a calendar, whether that's a written calendar, whether that's an Outlook calendar, whatever that looks like, and you get those calendarized. I'm also an example of how this can go wrong. I missed a full ride scholarship at Missouri State when I went to school. It's because I missed the deadline. I didn't apply in time. And so you don't want that for your child. You want to know what the deadlines are, and you want to stick to those. So this is a great time to build out that deadlines calendar. And again, college consultants are out there selling all sorts of stuff. Sometimes I just have to laugh. But one of the reasons why families legitimately maybe hire a college consultant is to help them do this work for them. Some families just simply don't want to do this. And so that is actually one of the best uses in my mind of a college consultant, is if you don't want to do the work, pay somebody else to do it. And so families do opt for that option. And that is, in my opinion, a legitimate reason to hire a college consultant. You're also at this point, which by the way, junior year is packed, so buckle in, but test preparation is something you're going to have to think about, because again, one of the main factors on which really scholarships are pinned are on this idea of standardized testing. And so there are free resources out there. And so I tell families to start with free and move up if the return on investment makes sense, right? I don't want families going out and spending thousands of dollars on test prep when it doesn't make sense. Start with the free resources. And so I mentioned Kansas City Public Library. They have 2 of my favorite free resources. One is lynda.com, which is now, I believe, LinkedIn Learning, but they give you free access, and there are test prep courses right there. Many public high schools and charter high schools will give you an elective option to take a test prep course. You should do it if you have the elective bandwidth to take that class. Learning Express is my next favorite one, and maybe even my primary favorite one. Again, Kansas City Public Library has this resource for free for patrons. And by the way, one of the beauties about Kansas City Public Library, why I love it so much, is you don't have to be within the bounds of Kansas City to be a member of Kansas City Public Library. Anyone can be, and here I am, a Johnson County resident. I have a library card to Kansas City Public Library. I don't have to live in Kansas City to be a patron. And so I would encourage you, wherever you live, regardless of who you are watching this, you should get a library card with the Kansas City Public Library. Use these free resources. You can also get test prep books. The problem with that is you have to turn them in periodically. Libraries want their books back, right? And so that can be a challenge if you don't get digital resources or a digital book. If you go the printed route, I do generally encourage families to go out and just buy it if they can afford it, because then you don't have to turn it back into the library, okay? And honestly, during COVID, they may not even be renting them out anyway. I'm not sure about Kansas City's specific policies on this, but you can check that out on their website. Great digital resources, though. And then you're generally going to take the ACT spring of senior year. If you're going to take it again, you'd probably take it fall of junior year, fall of senior year, maybe more, maybe less. But at that point, you'll have a general idea of what your score is going to be. You're off to the races to do your applications. Hey, and we've made it to senior year, right? This is awesome. So we're finally to that place that maybe some of you are joining the call and you're wondering, oh man, I'm here. I've got all this stuff that I have to do that Jason broke over the first 3 years. I have to do it now. Plus, I have to do the senior year stuff. And hey, sometimes we find ourselves in that situation. I personally didn't pick where to go to college until summer, until before I had to go. And so some of us just take a little bit longer to figure this stuff out, and that's fine. So, senior year, your primary goal is finish testing, applying for schools, acquiring financial aid, and then figuring out how to pay for college. So my helpful tips here: meet with your counselor, schedule campus tours when cost effective, or view their virtual tours online, especially in the era of COVID. Working on a deadlines calendar if you don't already have that from junior year, getting resources to help with your admissions essays, again, if it's allowed, and again, free resources if you have them. Maybe you can get a teacher that will help you look over that, somebody in your family that you know is good at writing, writing center at your high school, writing center at a community college, all sorts of places where you can get help here. And then I would highly encourage you to take AP and dual credit classes, especially for classes that you don't like. Two reasons why there's a benefit here. One, generally, if you're taking dual credit and not AP, advanced placement courses, you're going to get a transcript with the college class on it. Two, if you struggle in the class, like let's say you dual credit geometry or trigonometry or calculus, you're generally going to have a small class and you're going to have a teacher that cares about you. And some colleges, that's not going to be the case. You'll probably have an online math environment and you may be in a class of 400 students. And so take those as dual credit now. The third is you're generally going to pay a lower fee to do it now in high school than you'll pay if you were to go and take the class from me at KU Edwards and pay 1,000 credit hour, right? I believe that's our rate. Correct me if I'm wrong. Go and visit the website. But generally, I highly encourage you to dual credit if that's an option. All right, so I also mentioned financial aid. And so this is where we start talking about the free application for federal student aid. Two words in there that I want you to pull out and remember. One is free. You should not pay for the FAFSA. It is a free application. If you find that you filled out the FAFSA and you have to pay at the end, you're on the wrong site. The right site is linked here in my slide deck, fafsa.gov. fafsa.ed.gov, or Google FAFSA. Make sure you're on the Department of Education's website, and you should fill that out. It comes open October 1 of the senior year, and so that's why I have it here in the slide deck. You'll apply for federal financial aid, which is the other word that I want you to remember in the FAFSA is federal. So this is to get federal government aid to go to school. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. Your school might require additional applications for their federal or their financial aid, things like scholarships, for instance. So we see things like the CSS profile at 400 institutions across the United States. That is not the FAFSA, and you do have to pay for that. And so if you're at a school that requires that, you might have to go through that additional level of financial vetting. If you're not in senior year yet and you're watching this video, I would encourage you to go to the FAFSA forecast, where you can actually estimate your ability to get financial aid before the FAFSA opens for you, which again is October 1 of senior year. So for my seniors right now, the FAFSA is open for you. And what can you get in the FAFSA? Well, there's a hierarchy of kind of the goods that you can get if you fill out the FAFSA. And so those goods are, you can get free aid. If your family has low income, low assets, you might qualify for flat out free money, no strings attached from the government. And so that's a really good thing. For those of you that don't qualify for that because you have higher income and assets, you could get things like loans from the government. And I can tell you, although this isn't free money, the loans that are coming out right now from the FAFSA are at historically low interest rates in the 2%. And so really great options to fund if you're in that class where you want to get debt to go to school. And it comes in two flavors, unsubsidized and subsidized. So the difference between this is whether the government's going to pay for your interest while you're in school. That's subsidized. If your interest accrues immediately and you have to start paying on it, and by the way, I say paying on it, it will start accruing, but you actually don't have to make payments on your loans until after you graduate. But that is an option that comes from the FAFSA. And so if you're a lucky family that's watching this and you're like, oh man, we make a lot of money, we have a lot of assets, we shouldn't fill out the FAFSA, we're not going to get anything wrong in most cases. You'll actually will get these loans, and they can be really great options to fund school, even if you have high income, high assets. And then there are private loans. So you might be able to go out in the private space and get loans. Unfortunately for students, sometimes I think this is an option for them. A lot of times you don't have income, you don't have assets, you don't have a credit score when you're a student. And so you won't be able to get these loans, generally speaking, without a cosigner. And so parents get roped in, grandparents get roped in, that type of thing. Now, I mentioned that college is kind of like a used car lot. Okay. What I mean by that is you really don't know what college is going to cost until you get this thing called a financial aid letter. And so once you fill out the FAFSA, which again, come and view my FAFSA presentation next week if you're curious about what that looks like. I walk line by line through the FAFSA with you. But financial aid letter will show you what you've been offered by the government, what you've been offered by the institution. And then they'll say, this is the full cost to go to our university. This is all the aid you've been given. This is what it's going to look like to go to the school. This is the only time that you actually know what it's going to cost to go to that school. And so that's why, again, we put our applications across those three buckets, because we want to have many financial aid letters that we can lay down and compare against one another and pick the best option. If you only apply to K-State, you only apply to Missouri State, you only apply to Park, then you're only going to get one financial aid letter. You have no options at this point in the game. And it's too late normally at that point to come up with more options. The deadlines have passed but at that point. And so give yourself options is what I'm saying. That's a really important point. All right, so success in college. We'll skip this first bullet point because I know I'm running low on time, but there are options, by the way, to go to college for free. And so if you're watching this presentation, you're like, Jason, man, you lost me at that first slide when you said college was $115,000 a year. Good news, there are options to go to college for free, especially if you are flexible, especially if you don't necessarily have to have the traditional living on campus 4-year residential college experience. There are free options for you. And so I've outlined just a few here. Some of my favorites. You can study abroad. Actually, there are options to go to college for free studying abroad, believe it or not. You can go to some European countries, and if you can get in, there's free college in those countries, even for folks that are coming over from the United States. Military is an option, ROTC is an option, work colleges are an option, which are schools that actually their students work. And because they work, College of the Ozarks comes to mind, by the way, but there are many of these schools that you work while you're in college. And in order, and as a payment for that, you get to go to school for free. A+ program is something that's excellent on the Missouri side. That is a program at public schools that will allow you to go to college for free, community college for free, academic, sports, merit scholarships, etc. But one of my favorites, and listen up. So if you really want to go to college for free, find an employer that will help you to pay for it. Two of my favorite in this space are UPS or FedEx. I'm an equal opportunity employer in that regard. UPS, FedEx, also Starbucks. So UPS, let me start there. They offer, last I checked, $25,000 to go to school in benefits. And so between community college, maybe transferring to a cheaper 4-year state school, maybe doing online or going to a school like Western Governors University, I can make that $27,000 give you a free degree, which is pretty amazing. Starbucks will actually pay for you to get your undergraduate degree at Arizona State University. And you're like, hey, wait, Jason, we're not in Arizona. You would be correct. They pay for you to go online. And Arizona State is one of the best colleges for online degrees. They have something like 250 online degrees. And so lots of options out there. Starbucks, not only will you get your caffeination fix, but you're also going to get free college, which is pretty astounding. And so there are some options out there. Don't say college isn't for you. There are options for you to get your degree. And I put some of those on this slide too, and lowering college cost, things like alumni discounts, dual credit. We've talked about some of these, but I wanted to be fairly comprehensive in my list. Finally, when it comes to college, there's a few things here that will help you transition well. But the one that I would pull out is this 15 credit hours each fall and spring to graduate. They call it 15. There's a fancy term that they use that helps people remember this. But essentially, if you want to graduate on time 4 years, you need to take at least 15 hours of credits per semester. You need about 120 credit hours to graduate from college. So this will keep you on track. You need to work with your college counselor to help you do that. Fill out the FAFSA every year. Enroll in the lowest meal plan. Do you know why this is the case? I used to work in housing. Many will say, hey, go out. They'll put out your meal options in front of you, and they'll say, hey, well, this is 3 meals a week, and this is 4 meals a week, and what have you. A lot of families end up paying for a high priced meal plan. Well, what happens generally is your points don't roll over, you lose them. Whereas if you go with a lower meal plan, you can add money as you go and you don't lose points because you have near what you need. So I would encourage families to go with a lower price meal plan. You'll probably save money. So all sorts of things there. My final thought for you is the way that you can afford college is simply 2 ways. One, you can decrease the cost doing things like going to a cheaper school, 2-year, 4-year transfer, a number of things there. Or you can increase your funding. You can get things like scholarships. You can fill out the FAFSA. You can figure out ways to increase your funding pot to go to college. And so these are the 2 strategies: lower cost, increase funding. And we've talked about many, many options to do that. So, hey, here's my final slide, a couple things that I promised you. One, here's my contact information. Always feel free. You can call or text that number. You can email. I'm happy to help you. I love doing these presentations. I hope it's opened up your mind to some of the options here. And then finally, if you want the slides, feel free to visit. I post them, and actually I post other workshops here too. So if you want to look at some workshops that I've done for high schoolers, or you want to look at FAFSA presentation or things like that, I hope you come to the live one next week. But there are other workshops there too that you could check out as well if you're so interested. But if you want the PDF of these slide decks, it's available for you there. You'll be able to access all the links that I went through in this slide deck. So, hey, it's been my pleasure. Hopefully this has been informative for you. I hope to see you in the next 2 weeks on Tuesdays, where we cover some more topics that I think are really, really helpful for families. It's been my pleasure. And I will turn it back over. I believe there's still somebody on the other end of the line that will close us out.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Jason, thank you so much for your time tonight. Really appreciate all of the information and resources that you've shared. And we're excited to have you back in the next few weeks to talk about some additional college and career topics, including the FAFSA and then choosing your dream career. So thank you so much. And we will chat with you all soon. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Awesome. Thanks. See you all.